Lost Private. We're in Normandy.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 23 of the We're Not Lost Private Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Muccia, and it's the 28th of December, but I'm recording this for our New Year's Day New Year's Day post. So I'm playing a bit of a catch up, but I want to wish everybody a happy holidays. I hope everybody's had a fantastic month, and with the incoming New Year's, I wish you all the best for 2025. Um, Gonna go a little gonna a little off script today. We're going to talk about I just returned from the 80th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge, touring across Belgium and then just a tad into Germany at times, just to touch and see the Siegfried line. I took a small tour group over and was able to link up with a lot of friends and kind of just going to go over some of the things we saw and experienced. Some good stuff, lots of good stuff, and some not so good stuff, but nothing that took away from the trip at all. Uh, but I think everybody will get a kick out of it. If you have been following along on my social media, the visuals you can find either on our We're Not Lost Private Podcast Instagram account or my personal Twitter X account, or if we're friends on Facebook, you can go back and check out a lot of the images there. I'm not going to put a bunch up, so even though this will be on YouTube, it'll just be me being a talking head for probably 35, 40 minutes maybe. But like most podcasters, nobody loves the sound of their own voice, so I'll just do the best I can. So you have to bear with me. Just a quick note. We are on Patreon. If you'd like to become a subscriber, it's a measly $3 a month. And that gets you all kinds of behind the scenes stuff, trip reports, actual documents, the semi-monthly newsletter, and just a bunch of other things that make it worthwhile. And those $3 help pay for our Zoom account and our Buzzsprout account, and it helps keep the pod on the air. It also helps pay for new technology, which this will get a new rig, new camera. Hopefully this will help with some of the field reporting when I do go out. It'll bring it a little bit of a bit more quality product to you. And again, on programming note, we have some good stuff coming up, some great stuff. We're gonna have my a fellow tour guide and historian Bob Konings is gonna come on and talk about the Battle of Manhay and Grand Minel during the Battle of the Bulge. I've yet to schedule that with Bob, but once we do, I won't hold that information close. I'm also gonna have my fellow tour guides and friends Joe Hook and Edwin Popkin come on, and we're gonna do a three-sided attack of the Operation Pegasus, the rescue of the Red Devils from across the Rhine, in which Easy Company, the 506, participated in. We're going to do a division of labor. We're going to cover the British side of it, the Dutch resistance side of it, and obviously the Easy Company and 101st Airborne side of it. And I think that one's going to be a blast. In addition, I have my own shows that I'm going to be presenting. For those of you who have spotted them previously on World War II TV, I'm going to be doing a Battle for Holdy Battery in Normandy, and then another one on the Battle for Vierville on the 7th of June of 1944. These were presented originally on Paul Woodidge's World War II TV. There's been more information that's come loose in the intervening time between those presentations, a little bit more expanded information and improved presentation. So I'll be glad to get those out again. And then the Battle for La Drury, another 101st Airborne, this time 501st story from Normandy, and I'm looking forward to presenting those. We're going to go back to our bi-weekly format, so hopefully it'll be churning out at least two pods a month for everybody, and I'm looking forward to it. But let's kick into the 80th. It was great to go back over. It's a very busy time of year, especially because it is on one of the big anniversary years. There were lots of things that were scheduled during the week prior to our arrival on December 14th. But with so many things going on in and around Bastogne, we figured we'd start the first 2 days in that town, specifically because the Nuts Festival was going on and there's lots to see and do. We were all a little bit tired, a little jet laggy from flying into Brussels that morning. Picked up my crew, immediately went down to our check in with our B&B, which was a lovely little place outside of Gouvy. And then once we were done there, we shot right down to Bastogne to link up with friends. And the first thing we did was battle traffic and parking. We knew it was coming. The town did a very good job of putting out literature on where the parking lots were and where you could pick up shuttles. Despite that effort, we were unable to find our way to any of those lots in a timely manner. So we just kind of did some guerrilla parking up near the Martisan and walked our way in. And immediately was texting with Chris Langlois, one of Doc Rowe's grandsons, who's been a guest on the pod. And Chris kind of vectored us into where everybody was. And they were at the canteen, at least the group that we were going to check in with, which included Matt Leach, who portrayed Floyd Talbot in Band of Brothers, Lucy Jean, who played Renee Lemaire, and then Josh and Jonas and Ian from the Masters of the Air cast. All, by the way, all lovely guys, fantastic to talk to. If you get a chance, give them a follow on Instagram. You'll really enjoy it. It was great finally checking in with Matt in particular because I'd been a guest on his podcast, but we had never met in person. So it was great to finally link up with Matt in person. If you get a chance, give him a follow on Insta and the We Happy Few 506 podcast, which is an excellent podcast in its own right. So I'm going to give them a plug. And then finally was able to link up with my partner in crime and the co-creator of this podcast, Leighton. Again, Leighton and I have known each other for a couple of years now, but we had never met in person due to the fact that he lives overseas and I don't. But it was great to finally touch base with him, and he's a great guy. And again, give them a follow. Leighton's still working, supporting Matt, and they have a great tour system set up. They're going to be doing some Masters of the Air tours coming up in England. I highly recommend it. The cast members of Masters are excellent guys, and if you get on one of their tours, Matt's just a joy to be around because of his personality and his own experiences in filming band and his recollections of the veterans themselves. So give them a follow. But it was great to meet up with everybody and then touch base with my brother Reg, um, one of the great Bulge historians and tour guides out there. And a big supporter of my touring, has come on as a guest guide as well on several occasions. So it was great to see everybody, but man, was it mayhem. We were right in the center of the camp. There were plenty of reenactors around. Most of them looked really good. There were a few, I know Woody goes on rants about the reenactors, some of the reenactors. Some of these guys look really good. They looked the part. Other guys, it looks like they just grabbed whatever OD thing they had in their closet, threw it on, and decided to hop out there and run around. Um, I got no problem with facial hair as long as it's done properly. There were plenty of folks running around that looked like they normally wear goatees and they just decided to let the scruff go around it. It did not look right. Either shave it off and let it grow for a couple of days and let it look scruffy, or don't. There are people who stud earrings in and things like that. And these are, as somebody who's reenacted for the better part of two decades, these are easy fix items that you can do to make your impression look so much better. And it just was a bit lazy. And like I said, though, there were plenty of good looking reenactors out there that did it right, that were muddy and dirty. I mean, you can't pull off the scruffy look and then come in with a brand new set of utilities that look like they just came out of the box. So either do it right or don't do it at all. There's no real gray area for that. So, with that said, I mean, we did some light touring that first day, and we got to go around. We visited a couple of sites that were kind of special to the 501st, including the memorial in the cemetery courtyard. I was close friends with John Primerano, who served in the communications platoon of regimental headquarters of the 501st, and he was close friends with a lot of these guys, including a fellow by the name of Walt Crayley. Walter was one of the demolitionists that was killed in the accident in the seminary courtyard. There's plenty of material out there to read, to find out about that particular incident and what happened. So you don't need me to sit here and give it to you full blown. But it was kind of It really was a beautiful, especially when darkness started to fall and the Christmas lights were in full display. You got this kind of a carnival-y feeling around town, which I didn't mind. I didn't mind. There's room for celebration of the holidays here. It doesn't always have to be a somber affair with this, and so I didn't mind it as much. And the stores were all doing a brisk business, and the restaurants were all open, which was great. And we ate at Wagon Leo, had a fantastic meal there. Got to see the one of the 17 pounder the Sherman's was out, Firefly Sherman, which was fantastic. It was beautifully restored and in running quality, and it looked fantastic, including the scrim all up and down the barrel. Just a great looking beast. There had been a dusting of snow there, so there was this kind of this great quality to the photos, and the Christmas tree looked lovely. So if you get a chance to do one of these nuts weekends, I highly recommend it. But we would crash back at our B&B that night, and really um, slept soundly. I think we most of us slept soundly just because of the jet lag and all the activity and the excitement of catching up with everybody and seeing friends and just kind of being swept up in the energy of the event. But the next day we had dedicated to doing the Easy Company story around um, Bastogne. It does get overblown. I'm not a big fan of the Bois-Jacques. It's been turned into kind of a circusy touch point. A lot of the foxholes, the fighting positions have been ruined over time between reenactors and then the excavation of them to put together the social media digital component to the Bois-Jacques theme park now. But there's plenty of things you can go and see around the area that kind of make up for it. Um, I took my gang down to where the initial contact patrol, um, the combat patrol on the 21st of December took place, where John Julian was killed. We went down that path and into the areas. We kind of explained a bit about how the terrain was during that time frame in 1944, December of 1944, and then really how the patrol went about, how they went about leading the patrol, and then how the contact happened, and then what happened in subsequent actions beyond that. And just to be clear with everyone, the date that is on John's headstone is incorrect. John was killed on the 21st of December, 1944. Now, what in likelihood happened was once the Graves registration team secured his body and they repatriated him and buried him, it was probably on the 1st of January. And that's why his headstone says that. So if you're in that area and and you go to visit his headstone, just know that it's incorrect. There's lots of folks out there that think the combat patrol happened sometime on the 31st of December or the 1st of January where he was killed. He was not. He was killed on the 21st of December, 1944. After that was done, we went over to the Bois-Jacques so I could show my guys that were on my tour the fighting positions in the Bois-Jacques. We went up and down the third platoon area, then over to second, and then to first. I kind of gave them the wave of the hand. That's where battalion headquarters was located. We talked about the incidents in which Walter Gordon was wounded. We talked about the wounding of Bill Garnier and Joe Toy, the actions of Eugene Jackson and a bunch of the other fellas. We talked about Forrest Guth and a bunch of other Easy Company guys, some of which did not really make the miniseries. So it was nice to kind of talk about these guys. From there, we went over to Foix and walked through the attack from the third platoon's position. Um, and we were able to discuss the actions in some detail about what happened, where Frankie Mellett was killed, where Patrick Neal was killed, where Shifty shot the sniper. I'm always amazed when I see the look on people's faces where I show where Shifty shot from and where the quote unquote sniper was positioned. We're not talking about two football fields. We're not talking about 500 yards. We're talking about maybe 75 yards, 50 to 75 yards for the shot. So, and I'm not saying that to denigrate Shifty's prowess behind the rifle. Um, as many of the guys told me, it don't pay to shoot at Shifty when he's got a rifle. And that German surely found that out. But I mean, there's lots of things happening around him that can take your attention away from doing the job. So it doesn't make it less impressive. And we went up and down that road that leads down to where the church is in Foix. We talked about the first battalion aid station that was eventually overrun. Those of you that are Patreon subscribers, I wrote a post about that you can access on the Patreon page and read about the two medics that were there and their actions and what happened afterwards. I highly recommend it. Then we went up to the chapel and we talked about the recovery of two of the items that had been located in the chapel that were recovered by 101st troopers and eventually returned to the chapel. Um, and from there we were able to head back. We went up to Noville. We talked about well, we went through Easy's actions, and to me, one of the things that's really amazing is the fact that and this Mo Alley told me this during a phone call, and Johnny Martin wrote about this extensively. They were worried about that they thought they were going to be taken off the line when Patton's forces finally broke through on the 26th. And what happened was they were left on the line and then they were put into the attack. And the guys were basically they had a very fatalistic outlook about this. They felt like they were just going to get kept put in the attack until they were all dead. And they once they were done with the attack on Foix, they went into Cobru and then to Noville and then finally onto Rechamps. And this all takes place over the course of 3-4 days. And you have to really think about the mentality of the combat soldier at that point. Um, but it was very interesting to go there and show the guys that, especially when we were in Noville, we also talked about the First Battalion's defense and Team Desabry's defense of Noville early in the Bastogne campaign. We got to talk about Don Brigitte's book, of course, and then the actions of the First Battalion, specifically A Company. Hat tip to my friend Philip Russo, who is diligently working on a combat history of A Company. I can't wait to read that. Phil has been great about helping me with information, and we've been kind of helping each other with information and research. So I can't wait for Phil's book to come out because it's really going to be the compendium of A Company. But once we were done with all that, we ended up going back into Bastogne and over to the Bastogne War Museum and got to link up with friends. Got to link up with Donnie Edwards. If those of you who follow along with his Best Defense Foundation, I highly recommend if you could become a contributor in some capacity. Donnie's doing great work, not only with our World War II veterans, but he's also doing some great work with our current crop of veterans. Um, it was great talking to him and getting his insights. And not only that, one of my guys had played semi-pro football, and to link the two of them up so they could talk ball for a little bit was great. And again, got to talk to the Masters of the Air fellas. Awesome again, and Matt and Lucy had already headed out by that point. Got to touch base with my buddy Ronald and a number of other folks, but also found the time to link up with Sarah from World War II Museum and their tours. And Sarah's a good friend and a lovely person. Made some time where we could talk. I could catch up with Shane, who played Doc Rowe in Band of Brothers, and Robin, who played Babe Heffron, and then the esteemed historian and author John McManus, Dr. McManus, another great individual and great writer and chronicler of World War II history from the U.S. side. I highly recommend picking up his books, especially his book about the First Division at Omaha Beach. And really that kind of that tied into the end of the day, and it was just lovely to catch up with everybody. And again, this was another day where we kind of went to bed really tired and fulfilled because it was a lot of running around and a lot of touching base with people and just kind of running yourself a little ragged, but in a great way. It's one of those days, like I said, you go to bed very fulfilled because you're tired, but you've done so much and you've enjoyed everything that you've been doing, and it's fun to see people you haven't seen for a while, or haven't met in person. So again, if you're thinking about traveling to Bastogne during one of the anniversaries, I highly recommend it. You never know who you're going to run into. Again, it's a bit of a carnival, in a good way and a bad way. But if you prep yourself with the thought that, hey, there's going to be some stuff that's kind of difficult to deal with in terms of maybe traffic and parking, or seeing people that not dressed properly as reenactors or whatever, but you can kind of compartmentalize that and just enjoy it for what it is, and then enjoy the real history of it. I mean, we really set the stage for the follow-on days with that, just having these great 2 days. They're kind of a soft entry into the touring. But at day three, it was really going to pick up steam, and we were looking forward to it. Day three was going to be centered around the 101st, but non-easy company stories. There's so much to do and cover. It's very difficult to cover everything adequately. And what I tried to do was balance it by making stops that were relevant to the major units around the perimeter. And I realize this gives short shrift to, say, Team Snafu, all the elements of the 28th that were in town, or the other armored divisions that were in town. To me, I heartfeltly say I wish I could do more, but when you have a limited amount of time, you try to do the best you can. So we started the day at the X Crossroads, where the 326th Airborne Medical Company was captured, and the division clearing station was captured in the early hours of the Bastogne fight. We talked about some of the actions on the ground, including several troopers who were able to make their way out of the area, and then spent some time paying our respects at the memorial. And I thought this is a good way to start the day off in discussing the 101st, because it really does set the stage, because it shows like this impact of the capturing of the company and the hospital, and its impacts across the 101st, and encircled troops across the breadth and width of the battlefield. From there, we went over to Bizary, to discuss, in particular, the actions of the 2nd Battalion of the 501st. We spent quite a bit of time in their sector and discussing the actions of their companies, Dog, Easy, and Fox, their fights from late December all the way through the mid-January timeframe. And it's a lot to cover, and it's a lot of ground to cover. But I chose specific troopers and specific actions to get a good representation of the battalion and its actions. And not only that, to show the impact on the battalion, in particular, in the companies. Again, it gives you that insight into the combat mentality of the troopers that filled the units. There are a couple of instances where troops kind of went crazy after seeing the deaths of their buddies, and it leads to their deaths. Not to mention the individual heroism of guys like Bobby Hunter, um, who has staged a one-man patrol um, during that time frame. And it was a great stop, because I hadn't really toured Bizary extensively. I'd done a lot of research about it, and we were able to pinpoint a lot of items, a lot of places, a lot of keynote actions. And then we were able to go over to the 3rd Battalion area, over to Mont, where the memorial is for the 501st, spend some time there, chat about Vince Speranza and his role in the area. And it was really just a great time frame, because again, in the Bastogne story, the 506 gets so much of it because of the popularization of it. I just thought it was great to spend some time over at 501st neck of the woods. From there, we went over to the Bastogne Barracks and the Bastogne Cemetery to pay our respects to Renee Lemaire and Augusta Chewy, the two nurses that are featured in band. It's nice that you're not spending your time just talking about combat troops, and just showing these ladies who are representative of the folks who pitched in to enable the defenders of Bastogne to stay in the fight, and pay the proper respects. From there, we did a little off-script touring, went up into where the 1st and 2nd platoons of E Company launched their attacks into Flois. These are generally not visited. It's off the beaten track. And from there, we went over to the Bison Farm and the Native American Memorial, and we looked over some of the 3rd Battalion fighting positions, which, unlike the Bois-Jacques area where the 2nd Battalion of the 506 was, these are largely undisturbed, and have been left in situ, and they're really It's a really wonderful place to go. It's again, off the beaten track. Not a lot of people go there. I don't think a lot of people understand where it's at, or how to find it, which makes it nice because it's undisturbed. And really, it was a fine way to close out the day. We were starting to lose the light at that point. We also spent some time over at Raleigh covering the 502, especially the Christmas Day attack. We then went over to Savvy and stopped in that area, especially where the artillery was, and Hemarul, where the 463rd Parachute Field Artillery Battalion was. Then we went over to Kessler Farm and discussed the surrender demand and all that it entailed, and finally wound up the day at Assommoir, where the 4th Armored Division finally comes through and meets up with elements of the 326th Airborne Engineering Company of the 101st Airborne Division. And it was kind of and put a nice little bow on everything. With the Kessler Farm and the surrender demand, we got to talk about the 2nd Battalion of the 327. So we were able to cover most of the big maneuver units in the area for the 101st Airborne. And I apologize not covering the artillery units in depth. We did talk about the 907th at Martison, who was firing in support of the 501st, and then obviously the 463rd. But again, there's only so much daylight, especially in December. Your touring day starts probably around 08 in the morning and probably starts to wrap up around 4:30 in the evening. You lost of daylight. You run out of daylight, and you run hard and fast during these time frame, especially if your tour group is of right mind and physical abilities that they can do that kind of touring. If you've got a mixed group, sometimes you have to modulate it and you don't get to cover as much, but we were really pounding the ground hard. And that wrapped up again another full day, and I think we were all happy to head back and get a good meal in our bellies, and then hit the rack, because we knew we had a long day coming up the next day, because this was going to be the start of the Northern Shoulder on day 4. And we started by going up to Henri Chapelle American Cemetery to pay our respects to the men that fought there. It was nice to see a wreath placed for the 106th Division, the Golden Lions. They tend to get a short shrift, as does the 99th and the 28th when it comes to the fighting in the Ardennes, and to a lesser degree the 7th Armored Division. But it's always nice to go there and pay respects. There's one Easy Company man buried there. For those of you that are interested, Richard Hughes was in Easy's 3rd platoon. But we got to spend a lot of time looking over the graves in the area, and noticing the dates. You're seeing a lot of 16, 17, 18, 19 December dates. These are guys who end up getting killed early on in the fight. And the one thing I want to point out is, as we open up the discussion a bit, the broader discussion about the timelines, like the German timelines for seizing the bridges over the Meuse so they could pivot towards Antwerp. Really, the thing that stands out to me, and I tried to make a point of this with my tour group, was there's small bands of Americans out there that are fighting that are largely unknown and will never be known. Their names have kind of fallen by the wayside, but really, it's these little bands of Americans that are fighting and holding up the German advance. And sometimes they're platoons, sometimes they're squads, and they're holed up in these small towns and villages or on the line somewhere, where every rifle round they put out just puts another dent in the timeline for the Germans. And this all has a cascading effect. And on day 4, when we finally we moved out from the cemetery, we went up to Lanzerith to talk about one of these platoons. It's probably one of the most documented platoons at this point, the INR platoon of the 394th Infantry Regiment, the 99th, led by Lyle Bauk, and they're fighting up in and around Lanzerith, and how it's just one element that holds up the advance. And not only does it hold up the advance, depending on who you talk to, inflicts a serious amount of casualties on a German parachute unit that was fighting against, and ends up holding up Kampfgruppe Piper as well. And there's lots of little stories, and if you've read The Bitter Woods, or if you read Alex Kershaw's book about this particular fight, you'll you'll get a good appreciation for it, but nothing gives you the appreciation like standing on the ground. And I think to hammer home early on how a small unit in the defense can have an effect, a cascading effect on a timeline of an attacking force was really hammered home at Lanzareth. Um, and luckily, unlike the year before when I was traveling with my wife, it wasn't completely snowed in. We were able to get a good appreciation, although I did love the snow when we were there. Um, from there, we start to follow a bit of over the course of the tour, we skirt between the Sixth Panzer Army and the Fifth Panzer Army's advance. In this case, we were kind of mirroring Kampfgruppe Piper out of the Sixth Panzer Army. Um, and then we head to Hansfeld. This is a rear area for the 99th and its subordinate units and its attached units. Marlene Dietrich was supposed to play a show there the day after the attack started. That obviously never comes off, but we were able to go to Hansfeld and get an appreciation for what happened there. I'm going to start picking up the pace a little bit with the days um, and the descriptions. I'm not going to get into too many details for that. I hate to say it, but you have to come on one of my tours or just do a lot of reading, and you'll get a good feel for all of it. But we moved into Bullingen then, and then started talking about some of the fights that took place. And some of these rear echelon, what you would consider rear echelon or field artillery units that are ended up getting pressed into infantry duty, and how they are able to help, like the INR platoon of the 394th, hold up the German advance, and again contribute to that effort. And then moved down. We actually went off script again. I wasn't intending on taking the guys to Merlscheid, but we ended up heading down that way, and it was some really neat now and then photos in that area as well. So we're kind of chronologically and geographically off script, but again, when you have the right tour group with the right mindset, you really can plug and play some of these places. And one thing I do like to point out, if I posted recently about how my tours aren't just all about military history. Some really beautifully scenic areas along these routes that if you get to stop, and if you are a fan of or appreciate religious imagery and iconography, there's some lovely roadside shrines in the areas. The churches are absolutely stunning. You'll definitely get something out of that as well. Then we were able to dip in close to the German Belgian border and check out some of the Siegfried Line, and then head up to Elsenborn Ridge and talk about the fighting around there, the fighting of the 99th and the Second Infantry Division and all the other units that took part in the fighting in that area. From Elsenborn, it was down to Sanvy, in particular to look over the area where the 168th Engineer Combat Battalion fought in the Prumaberg. If you have not been up in that area, I highly recommend it. Again, much like the positions for the G506 and the 3rd Battalion of the 506th, those positions are still in situ, and you really, they're undisturbed. So if you get a chance to go up and visit them, I highly recommend do some research about the 168th and their fight up there, and Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Riggs and his role in helping to secure that area, which basically helped whatever units could escape from the 106th out of the egg perimeter. And apologies for that. Getting texts from the spouse that allow the whatever units could finally escape from the egg-shaped perimeter and past Schonenberg. They really helped make that happen, even though they eventually get rolled up on their own. We did after that headed into Sanvy proper, and then checked out the memorial to the 106th, and then down to Vielsom to look over the Sherman Memorial for the 7th Armored Division. And again, you're fighting daylight by that time, and you're doing your best to cover a lot of ground and talk about a lot of little engagements. But it was great to be able to do that. Um, we knew the next day was going to be very heavy. Day 5 was going to include Malmedy, Bonnes, and everything that happened in that area. But we kicked off day 5 down at Poto, which was really nice to see. There's finally a monument there that covers Task Force Maze and their engagement with Kampfgruppe Hansen and all the fighting that took place in that area. Um, it's great to go there because you can do a lot of now and thens because it's undisturbed because essentially it's just a stretch of road. Um, and from there we went down to where the Malmedy Memorial was, and then scooted up to Malmedy itself. And unfortunately, where Francis Curry earned his Medal of Honor is kind of overtaken by modernity. You can't really get a good appreciation for it. We did talk about the role that Malmedy played during the offensive and then the counteroffensive to eliminate the Germans from the area. From there, we went to Stavlo, and it was great to go there because not only did we get to talk about the fighting there, especially start to talk about the 30th Infantry Division, the old Hickory Boys, and their infantry regiments that were involved in the fighting there. But we got to catch up again with Sarah and see Robin and Shane again as we overlapped the World War II Museum and my buddy Joris as he was guiding one of the tours. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see my buddy Edwin, who will be coming on with Joe to talk about Operation Pegasus. Edwin was with another group there from the World War II Museum. But it was great to see everybody and touch base again. From there, we got to go to head to Trois Ponts, which was one of the um, earmarked stops for one of my guys that was on my tour, Ben Powers, who is a guest on the podcast. If you haven't read Never a Dull Moment, I highly recommend it. Ben did a fantastic job of discussing the 80th Anti-Aircraft Anti-Tank Battalion and their origins and then their performance during World War II. If you can get a copy of it, I highly recommend it. And Ben's on social media, the Commander's Voice podcast. Um, touch base with him. I'm sure he'd be glad to talk about the 80th boys. And we were able to do that. We were able to go to Trois Ponts and talk about the 80th and also the 505th in their defense of the area. And really it was um, great to see the eye-opening effect of standing on that ground was on Ben. He truly got appreciation. We all did of the terrain and what the 505th and the 80th had to deal with in terms of the defense of the area. And you again, it's great to read books and it's great to read um, in depth all of the after action reports and then the personal anecdotes and books about written by the men who were there. But there's nothing that takes the place of standing on the ground. But anyway, we were able to continue doing the research. I mean, continue doing our touring. We went all over the place from there. We went to Vermont, um, and and finish up the day in La Roche in Ardennes. And I have to credit my partner in crime, my fellow tour guide, and my tour guide partner, Dave Campbell, for introducing me to La Roche in Ardennes. And it's such a gorgeous town. Lots of fun things to do there. If you haven't visited, I highly recommend it. Cobblestone streets, great cafes and restaurants, and just some beautiful memorials there as well. And we were able to close out the day. And from there, it was going to be another heavy day because we were gonna follow along and basically watch the final death throes of Kampfgruppe Piper, but do it through the eyes of the men on the Allied force who were making that happen. And we kicked off the day at L'Église. We went through the December 44 museum. It's a very lovely museum, where well done. Interesting to see some of the artifacts they have on display there. Obviously, seeing the King Tiger is always a thrill. We were able to do some now and thens, and from there, head over, dip down back into the 5th Panzer Army's area of operations, especially over, we went to Barak de Fraiture and Parker's Crossroads, and from there down to Manet and Grand Minel, and really, I can't wait to have my buddy Bob Koenigs come on and talk about that fight in total. Bob's going to be on the pod soon. We're going to nail down a date, and then I'll have a release date set for everybody. But again, it's always great to see some of these vehicles still in their, on display, and the Grand Minel Panther is never disappoints for me. Um, yeah, and from there we kind of we finished up a bit early after hitting Stomont and a bunch of other little stops in there, and Chenot, and from there went back down to Bastogne because we had time, and one of the guys wanted to visit the 101st Airborne Museum in town. So on the way, we were able to stop at Emerald and visit the church and tell the story about the bed sheets, and um, that's a fun story. And while we were at the 101st Airborne Museum, got to touch base with Helen Patton again, which was always interesting. Everybody was great. Was excited to meet her and talk to her, and she talked about her grandfather quite a bit. And we once that was complete, we did one last stop over to where John Julian was killed for our group photo. And then the following day, we went into Trier and did some Christmas marketing and enjoyed the sights and sounds, and then um, packed up and headed up to Brussels for our final night before flying home. And it was a bit of a whirlwind, and I really enjoyed it. Again, if you have the right group with the right mentality, touring it can be such joy, and these guys really were. There were no holes barred. There was nothing they didn't want to do in terms of touring. If we had spare time, there were suggestions flying from all over the van about where we could go and how we could had spend those last few moments. Because as I told them when we first talked about that quote unquote guerrilla touring, I said, you never know when you're going to get back over here. And I always look at my every trip that I take as possibly my last one. So I want to stuff as much as I told him, as much as you can into it. Like stuffing 20 pounds of stuff into a 5 pound bag. You want to do everything you can. And these guys were down for that. And so when you come over, I highly recommend having that kind of that mentality, especially if you come in December when the weather's not really going to be cooperative and you're going to have to put up with rain or sleet or snow or whatever. Come with that mentality that you're there to tour like it's the last time you're ever going to be there, and I guarantee you're going to have a great time either way. And the food can't be beat. The food is so good, and the architecture is beautiful. I mean, there's so much more to touring than just going to muddy fields to stare at where men fought and died. There is so much more to it. And I highly recommend taking advantage of every aspect of it. Um, if you're interested in touring with me, you can find me on social media, or you can hit me up at any of the We're Not Lost Private Podcast social media accounts. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter and X, or whatever we're calling it these days. You can also find the podcast on Buzzsprout, Amazon Music, or any of the other podcast catchers you might use, um, Apple Podcast, et cetera, et cetera. Again, if you're interested in becoming a Patreon subscriber, it's only $3 a month. You get lots of extras. Um, I'm looking forward to this upcoming year. I think it's going to be fantastic. Like I've already got 3 or 4 months of material scheduled mentally. Now I just got to put it all together and unload it. And I've got to touch base with a bunch of author friends to see if they want to come on and talk. There's so much stuff out there to talk about. With regard to World War II, and not just Easy Company, although we love to talk about Easy Company here because it's one of our tentpole topics. But I love to branch out and talk about other topics as well, as you could probably noticed going through the tour stuff. And again, if you want to take a look at some of the imagery from this stuff, you can check out any of our social media accounts. You'll probably catch it, and they're neatly labeled by the day. Um, the touring days. It's just a smattering. It's not a comprehensive visual accounting. If you want that, you're going to have to come on one of the tours. And we're very competitively priced. So if you are interested in touring with me, check out my webpage. You can find that in my links. Or if not, just message me and I'll send you the link. We have a full spate of offerings. So with that said, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks again for checking in. Looking forward to this year, and Happy New Year, everyone.